Hey guys, tonight we're not sitting on a throne or sipping wine beneath a golden canopy. You're not the one people bow to. No, tonight, you're the one who bows repeatedly, precisely, and often while holding a chamber pot. You're not here to sparkle. You're here to serve. The velvet corridors you walk through seem enchanted at first. The rugs hush your footsteps. The candlelight glints off tapestries stitched with battles you've never heard of. Perfume and beeswax hang heavy in the air. But you don't glide. You trudge. Carefully. Because even a scuff on the parquet could get you scolded. Or worse. You're a court maid now. One of the nameless, ankle-sore girls tucked behind every queen. You got 3 dresses to your name. All hand-me-downs. You sleep on a straw mattress you share with lice and prayers, and you've been taught to hold your tongue so tightly it might as well be stitched to your palate. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft, background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing they take from you at court isn't your shoes. It's your name. You might arrive as Marjorie from Devon or Isabel the Miller's girl. But soon enough, Chudgeon, you're just the one who refills the ink. Or the small one who irons collars. The queen barely glances your way unless your hands are too cold, or your hem drags dust into her chambers. But don't worry, you're still breathing. For now. Most court maids are chosen young. 14, if you're lucky. 10, if your father's debts need urgent clearing. Some are daughters of minor nobility, sent in for training or to make useful connections. Honey, others, more like you, come from kitchens, parishes, or farmsteads, their hair plaited with false hope. They told you it would be a position of honor, and it is, if you define honor as quietly enduring everything and being thanked for nothing. You arrive clutching a little satchel with a comb, a rosary, and your mother's embroidered handkerchief. They take the comb. It's not clean enough. They let you keep the handkerchief, but only if you mend the tear first. Sewing, by the way, is now your life. If you're not stitching under things, you're darning someone else's sleeves. You learn to thread a needle in the dark. You learn to keep your thimble tied to your wrist with ribbon so you don't lose it during Mass. And yes, you will be expected to kneel properly the whole time, even if your knees are already raw from scrubbing. The beds are another shock. You thought the palace would be warm, plush, dreamy. But your room is up a narrow stone stairwell, in the cold shadow of the bell tower. The mattress is stuffed with straw that pokes through the ticking. The girl beside you snores. The one on the other side mutters names in her sleep, some real, some not. You pull your blanket up to your nose and try not to cry too loudly, because tears stain the linen, and you'll have to wash it yourself in the morning. But not too much water. Mind, the fountain in the servants' courtyard only runs between matins and terce, and once the royal laundresses start their rounds, you better not be caught still filling your jug, and the floors... Oh, the floors. You scrub them every second day, on your hands and knees, with cloths that used to be someone's sleeves. Your fingers swell. Your wrists ache. If you're lucky. The steward notices and mutters something that might, eventually, lead to a better posting. If you're not lucky, he steps over you and you get chalk dust in your nose from the boys running documents across the palace. Still, You endure. Because one girl just like you was once promoted to lady-in-waiting and married a goldsmith's son, or so the story goes. No one remembers her name. Historians still argue whether maidservants at court truly had social mobility, or whether these hopeful tales were just a tool to keep them obedient. One record from Burgundy shows a laundress becoming a royal midwife. Another from Castile hints that a queen's favorite chambermaid married into minor nobility. But for every one of these stories, there are dozens more where the girls simply vanish from the records, their lives eaten by time. Here's a fringe detail. Some courts assigned maids based on hair color. In 15th century Aragon, a queen preferred brunettes, believing they absorbed less celestial heat and stayed calmer under pressure. So if your hair didn't match the mood, dyed, with lye, good luck keeping your scalp. At court, appearances aren't just vanity, they're weaponized. You learn to keep your face still, even when someone slaps you with a glove, not playfully. You learn to walk with a book on your head, literally. You learn to say, yes, your grace, even when the command makes no sense. And you definitely learn never to look the king directly in the eyes unless spoken to. One girl did. Once. Sometimes, as you scrub the same tile for the third time, you hum a little song from your village, softly, under your breath, just enough to remember you existed before this place. That once, someone called you darling, but don't drift too long, because if the head maid finds you dawdling, she'll dock your meal, boiled turnips with vinegar, if it's a feast day. And you don't want to miss dinner. It's the only warm thing you'll have all day. You don't wake up with the sun. You wake up before it, usually to the shuffle of feet above you or the creak of a door you forgot to latch. The air is thick with breath and candle smoke. Your dress is damp where it touched the wall overnight. Someone's elbow is in your ribs. Another girl is already muttering her morning prayer while yanking on her apron. You have 10 minutes to look like someone who never sleeps. Down the hall, the senior maid claps once, sharp and decisive, and everyone moves. No one questions why. You just start. First, water. Not warm. Not even lukewarm. Cold. From a basin filled the night before, you splash it on your face, on your arms, over your hands, and then dry them with a cloth that still smells like last week's starch. By the time the first bell rings, you're already inside the queen's antechamber, laying out undergarments. The linen shifts slightly in the draft from the chimney. You smooth it again. Not because she'll notice, but because her mistress of the robes might, and she's the type to remember who creased the sleeves yesterday. Being a court maid isn't just about cleaning. It's about presence, silence, proximity. You're there when the queen wakes up, and you're there when she sighs before bed. You know when her ring pinches, when her mood sours, when her back aches, and you know not to speak of any of it outside these curtains. But you do listen, all the time. The queen talks freely when she thinks no one's really there, and who counts a maid as company? Really. That's when the gossip spills, quietly, carelessly, and sometimes dangerously. You learn that the Spanish ambassador brought the wrong gift, that the king favors the red-haired falconer, that someone's cousin has been moved to a convent with surprising haste, and that the baby the queen lost last winter might not have been the king's at all. Of course, you don't say any of this aloud, but you file it away. Just in case you ever need a favor, historians still argue whether court maids served as political spies or simply became ones out of necessity. In the French court of Charles VI, it's rumored that a maid passed secrets between Queen Isabeau and her lover using coded embroidery. In Denmark, a chambermaid's confession, given under suspiciously convenient duress, led to the exile of an entire noble house. And in Tudor England? Well, let's just say Anne Boleyn didn't rise alone, nor did she fall alone. You pass messages sometimes. Not full letters, those are too risky, but notes, folded corners of parchment, slipped into gloves or pockets or hems. He waits by the orchard wall. The lady in blue saw everything. Burn this. You don't ask who they're from. You don't ask who they're for. You just place them where told, and you definitely don't read them, except maybe once. That one time. You still remember the words, and your fingers burned after. There's an art to whispering without moving your lips. You learn it from the older girls. You also learn how to smile with your eyes, how to place a hairbrush on a table at just the right angle, and how to use a silver tray to reflect someone entering behind you but not everything's so clandestine. Some mornings, your only duty is to dress the queen, which sounds regal, until you're wrestling with a corset that was definitely sized for someone else's ribs. You tie laces, smooth bodices, fluff sleeves. You hold your breath while she complains about everything from weather to court music, and then you brush her hair. This is where your day slows down. The hairbrush is ivory, inlaid with pearls. The bristles are wild boar. The scalp beneath it is pale, tender, sometimes irritated, but the rhythm helps. Brush. Pause. Brush again. It's the one time you're allowed to stay still. The queen may close her eyes. You may exhale. If she's feeling kind, she might even speak to you. Not kindly, but not cruelly either. More like to a shadow. Do you think he'll send for me today? She might murmur. Or, she thinks that new pendant makes her look younger. Or, once, you remind me of someone I knew. Before. You don't answer. You nod. Maybe. But your silence becomes a mirror. And sometimes that's all she wants. One of the older maids once told you, a queen's intimacy is more dangerous than her rage. And she was right. Because if she favors you, others grow jealous. If she forgets you, you vanish. If she confides in you, you become a liability. Still, there are lighter moments. Once, you tripped while pouring lavender oil, and it splashed all over her slippers. The queen laughed. Actually laughed. You expected to be beaten, or dismissed, but she waved it off. Smells better than the ambassador, she muttered. You nearly fainted from relief. You learned to treasure those cracks. The odd laugh, the crooked grin, the misbuttoned chemise. They remind you that the queen is, somehow, still a person, even if you're never allowed to be one. One fringe tidbit. In certain Italian courts, it was customary for maids to kiss the hem of a noblewoman's dress when offering a gift, but not too quickly. A slow kiss meant humility. A fast one? Disrespect. One girl misjudged the pace and was reassigned to poultry duty for a year. But it's not always so formal. Sometimes, when no one's looking, you sneak bits of gossip to the other maids. Not much. Just enough to trade. She's bleeding again. The countess cried during her prayers. He hasn't touched her since Easter. And just like that, the hierarchy shifts. The maid who knows most rises. The one who's caught talking, well, she's gone by dawn. Her bed empty. Her name scraped off the list. So you keep quiet, but you listen, and you survive. You don't have a clock, but your body becomes one. You wake when the floors are coldest and the candles are lowest, not by choice, just by conditioning, like a hunting hound or a milkmaid, Only here, instead of hay and cows, you rise to the sound of shoes clacking down a stone corridor, heels you must not outrun, only follow. Before the palace wakes, you're already 3 tasks deep. Water buckets are brimming, chamber pots are emptied, the air is full of soot, wood smoke, and the faint, lingering smell of someone's late-night wine breath. You've already carried linen through a corridor too narrow to turn around in, and you've dodged the steward once. He likes to catch girls before they've done their hair. There's no breakfast waiting. You might snag the end of a loaf if the cook's in a generous mood, but usually your stomach rumbles like the castle gates before they open, so you chew mint leaves. You learned that trick from an older girl named Annette. She left last winter. No one says why. Historians still argue whether servants were fed regularly or simply scavenged at court. Records from Burgundy suggest some maids received stew and ale. English documents show rations of oats, garlic, and hard cheese. But first-hand letters from ladies-in-waiting imply many lower maids went hungry, especially during Lent or when nobles traveled. One maid even snuck dried fish from a ceremonial feast and sewed it into her petticoat. They say the stench gave her away 3 days later. But you're not thinking about fish. You're thinking about that dress. The dress. The one made of velvet so dark it looks like ink. It has to be laid out, perfectly creased, not a smudge in sight. And her slippers. Oh God. The right pair. Because last time, you brought the ones with the ruby toe and she snapped, "I said garnets, not bloodstones." You don't cry. Not because you're strong, but because there's no time. Tears blur your vision, and you're holding embroidery needles again. Better to keep your lashes dry. A fringe fact: in 14th century Navarre, noble women believed placing pearls in their slippers cooled the humors and kept their tempers calm. You've never seen that work. Pearls just make them trip. Before sunrise, you've already turned the mattress, fluffed the down pillows, laid out pins in the correct order, gold first, then silver, then bone, and lit the scented taper that smells like pressed violets and vinegar. Then comes the part you hate, the corset. The queen rarely lets anyone else lace her up. It's you, always you, because your fingers are slim, because you don't chatter, because she once said your hands were like music, which is flattering until she's breathless and tugging your hair in frustration. You pull the laces inch by inch, crossing them tight, adjusting her shift as you go. The stays dig into her ribs, and her shoulder blades jut like wings. You whisper the same little apology every time. Sorry, sorry, sorry. But only in your head. Out loud, you say, "Yes, Your Grace." Then the gown, layered over petticoats and chemise, fastened at the bodice, lifted gently at the train. You smooth the wrinkles, tuck a stray curl behind her ear, avoid eye contact, and all of this before the sun has even hit the windowsill. The queen doesn't always notice the effort. She's distracted, thinking of court matters, or a dream she had, or whether the ladies in waiting will outdress her again. You never know. But the court notices, and they watch. Your posture, your obedience, your hands. Are they shaking? Is your hair tidy? Is your gown too fine for your rank? You don't wear jewelry? Not because you dislike it, but because it would mark you as aspiring. An ambition in a maid is deadly. Instead, you wear humility, sewn into every stitch of your apron, laced into your boots, scrubbed into your fingertips. But ambition still flickers, doesn't it? Even when you push it down. It bubbles up late at night when you think, what if? What if you married the scribe with the soft voice? What if you caught the eye of a visiting knight? What if the queen took a liking to you, like truly took a liking, and made you something more? Then you shake your head. That's not your path. You're not one of those girls, the ones who steal kisses in shadowed cloisters, the ones who wear perfume not assigned to them. You're the good one. But being good doesn't mean being safe. One time, you spotted a blot of ink on the queen's writing table. You wiped it clean before she saw. The next day, her inkwell was missing. You were questioned for an hour, not accused, but watched, carefully, suspiciously. And just like that, you realized all it takes is one wrong move, one misstep, one blot. You start to dread the sound of your own name, because when it's said loudly, it's usually bad. The chores continue. You help the physician lift bandages on the queen's ankle. She twisted it last week in the rose garden. You fetch glass flasks of camphor and honey. You boil water in copper pots and count the heartbeats under her wrist when asked. You know her pulse. You know her cough. You know the mole behind her ear and the sound she makes when she laughs too hard. You know more about her than her own husband does. But she doesn't know your last name. That's the rule of being a court maid. You're essential, but invisible. A quiet debate lingers among scholars. Were court maids respected household members, or simply soft-bodied tools in stiff uniforms? Some say they had rank, given places in procession, mentioned in letters. Others argue they were glorified furniture, used and replaced with no fanfare. One particularly cynical historian called them living curtains. You'd probably agree, except curtains don't get blisters. By mid-morning, your eyes are heavy, your hands red from starching linens. You pass a mirror and barely recognize yourself, and yet, when the queen looks her best, and you know you helped make that happen, something in your chest lifts. Briefly, a flicker of pride, then it's gone, because you still have 14 hours left in the day. There's a perfume for every mood. You learn that early. One for banquets, one for mornings, one for when the Duke is visiting. You don't choose them. You just open the vial, dab it behind the queen's ears, and hope the rose oil masks the garlic from last night's stew. But no perfume can hide the breath of someone whose teeth are rotting beneath their smile. You hand her a silk glove. She pulls it on slowly, theatrically, wincing a little. The gloves are scented, of course, lined with crushed violet petals and soaked in civet, a fringe favorite. But under the delicate powder and polish, you've seen it, the inflamed gums, the blackened molars, the faint line of blood she swallows when no one's looking. Queens smile a lot, even when it hurts, and while she smiles, you're polishing her shoes, or straightening a necklace, or standing by with a tray of small dried plums, just in case she starts coughing again. There's a myth that everything at court smells sweet. It doesn't. Under the perfume, you smell rot, not just of food, but of people, of sweat baked into brocade, of wigs that haven't been cleaned in weeks, of chamber pots not quite emptied, and beneath it all, always, the heavy, sour breath of someone trying to pretend their body isn't betraying them. Historians still argue whether noble hygiene was truly worse than that of commoners. Some point to records of weekly baths, imported soaps, and specialized laundresses. Others cite the sheer frequency of tooth decay, abscesses, and parasite infestations found in royal remains. One bizarre account even describes a Hungarian countess who insisted on washing only her jewelry, not her hands. Meanwhile, you wash the queen's hair. Not daily. That would be wasteful. once every few weeks. The process takes hours, and it's your job to prepare the herbs: rosemary, bay, nettle, marigold. You boil them in vinegar or wine, depending on the season. You test the temperature with your wrist. Not too hot, not since that incident last year. She sits by the hearth as you pour the mixture, strand by strand, working it in with slow fingers. Sometimes she hums, sometimes she stares. Once, she wept, silently, without explanation. You didn't ask why? And, when her scalp is clean, you comb it straight, dry it by firelight, and oil the ends. Then you braid, left, right, under, pull tight, but not too tight, fasten with ribbon, tuck the tail, step back. Then, she stands, her body wrapped in a silk shift, her hair glistening, her expression somewhere between goddess and ghost. And you gather the towels, you rinse the basin, you sweep the fallen hairs into your apron, because leaving even one on the floor might spark a lecture about cleanliness, or worse, bad omens, a fringe tidbit. In parts of Germany, royal maids were once required to burn the hair after washing, believing that discarded strands could be used for curses. In this court, they just toss it in the fire. But you swear, once, you saw a lady tuck some away in her sleeve. Washing done, the day rolls forward, the queen attends council. You're not allowed inside, but you wait just outside the door, holding a platter of candied fruit and a small mirror. Always ready. Sometimes, the door cracks open mid-session, and a lord storms out, red-faced and muttering. You pretend not to hear. Other times, a page brings a note, folded once, sealed with wax. You hand it over without comment. And all the while, the queen looks flawless, powdered, perfumed, pressed. You've fixed her hem 5 times already today. You haven't sat down once. You pass other maids in the hallway, each with her own queen, countess, duchess. You exchange nods, not smiles. Smiling is risky. It suggests you know something. One girl, Alice, always smiled. Big teeth, fast wit, nervous laugh. Then one day she was gone. Left her shift hanging by the basin. You never found out what happened. You asked once. The head maid just said, she wasn't careful. Careful is your new religion. You even breathe carefully now. One time, the queen was in a temper and you sighed, barely audible. Her eyes snapped to yours like a hawk spotting a mouse. Is something wrong? She asked, voice sweet as syrup laced with venom. You said no? Of course. But your hands trembled for hours. That's the trick here. You're not allowed to have feelings. Not ones anyone can see. The queen can rage, weep, sulk, swoon. You must remain serene, efficient, invisible. You practice this. Late at night, in the tiny mirror above your cot, you rehearse expressions. How to nod with empathy but not opinion. How to look alert without staring. How to bow just deeply enough that your knees don't crack. Because if your knees crack too loudly during a royal procession, people remember. There's one part of the day you do enjoy. Preparing the queen's cosmetics. The rouge made from crushed cochineal beetles. The skin whitener that smells like almonds and probably contains lead. The tiny brushes made of squirrel hair. The face patches shaped like stars or teardrops, used to cover blemishes, but worn like decorations. She lets you place them. It's your one small moment of artistry. You choose the angle, the shape, the exact spot. Make me look mysterious, she'll say. You try. But honestly, the most mysterious thing is how her eyebrows haven't fallen out from all that tweezing. Scholars debate whether court cosmetics were self-expression or self-erasure. The sheer layers of powder, paint, and scent turned women into living portraits, or prisoners, or both. All you know is, by the time she's ready for her evening meal, she no longer looks like the woman who sighed in pain this morning. She looks like a portrait, regal, composed, slightly glowing, and entirely unreachable. As she walks away, surrounded by guards and ladies and light, you trail behind, close enough to catch her scent, far enough not to be seen, and you wonder if she removed all of it, powder, pearls, perfume, would there be anything left? Then someone calls your name. There's still laundry to fold. You hold the note with 2 fingers, gently, precisely, as if it might explode. It's folded 4 times, sealed with wax, and bears no crest. That's how you know it matters. You don't read it. Of course not. But your eyes linger half a second too long on the corner, where a faint script curls upward like a vine. The queen saw it arrive. She nodded once, nearly imperceptibly. You tuck it under the cushion by her writing desk, just as instructed. No words spoken, no glances exchanged. Later, she'll retrieve it alone, with trembling fingers and a face schooled into stillness. And you'll be across the room, fluffing the cushions or realigning the tapestry fringe. This is how court love works, not in poems or songs, but in scribbled lines slipped beneath sleeves, in quiet looks exchanged across a hall crowded with witnesses, in the subtle removal of a ring, then its return, in how someone's name is mentioned once, and then never again. You know these patterns better than anyone. You are always there, folding linens, buttoning gowns, pretending not to listen as breath catches and lips brush too closely when fastening a necklace, because affairs at court don't happen in beds, they happen in gestures, in fans flicked open twice, in gloves dropped with casual precision, in how someone lingers too long in the passageway between the chapel and the music room. Historians still argue whether courtly love among royals was ever truly romantic, or just another mask for political maneuvering. Letters from the court of Eleanor of Aquitaine suggest passion, yet contemporaneous sources from Italy insist most of it was theater, deliberate, coded, and useful. You wouldn't call it love. You'd call it performance with stakes, high ones, because sometimes someone does get caught, like that maid last spring. Her name was Brigitte. She delivered a note, just like you, but she smirked while doing it. A single moment of pride. The wrong person saw. Within a week, she'd been reassigned to the laundry chambers, cold, damp, forgotten. You haven't seen her since. A fringe tidbit. In early modern France, it was said that slipping a note into a lady's glove was the most intimate gesture a man could make, more so than kissing her hand, because the glove touched her skin all day. Some gloves were even stitched with hidden messages in the lining. You've seen one. Once. A love poem embroidered in silver thread. The wearer had no idea. You've become an expert in looking the other way. You walk into rooms where 2 nobles stand too close and ask, "Shall I bring more tea?" You pick up rings from beneath sofas and pretend you believe they slipped. You notice hair tousled in places it shouldn't be tousled and say nothing as you adjust a cloak. You've caught nobles whispering behind curtains, pressed against cold windows, fingers intertwined. Once, you found a locket that wasn't the queen's, still warm. You returned it silently to her jewelry box, but the most dangerous affair of all is the one she's having now, or rather, maybe having You're not entirely sure, but the signs are there. She dresses a little faster, smiles just slightly when certain names are spoken, leaves her letters unfolded, as if waiting for an answer. You're not foolish enough to ask, but you've started noticing the patterns in her silences. One day, she asks you, "Do you believe people can love in places like this?" You pause, just a beat too long. "If they're careful, perhaps." She smiles. "No one here is careful." Then she waves you away. That night, you find a scrap of lace in her writing desk drawer. Not hers. Too coarse. Too common. You close the drawer without touching it, and you tell no one, because secrets are currency, and you are not rich. Court is a web, and every thread pulls another. You've seen affairs destroy women, not just queens, maids too, girls who took risks, who kissed in stairwells or passed notes of their own, who thought they were in love until the letters were found and their names were no longer spoken. You learn to guard not only the queen's reputation, but your own, because at any moment you might be accused of being the go-between, the watcher, the accomplice, or worse, the rival. One glance too long, one compliment misinterpreted. That's all it takes. So you keep your eyes low, your lips still, your footsteps light, and when you brush the queen's cloak across her shoulders, you wonder who else might get that close tonight. But for now, your task is simple. You light the candles, you close the shutters, you fold the bed linens exactly as she likes them, corners tucked, hem smoothed, lavender sachet in the center. She's gone to supper, glittering and composed. The scent of rose and smoke clings to her absence. You look around her chambers. A glove on the floor, a cushion slightly compressed, a drawer slightly ajar. You adjust everything, leave no trace, and when she returns, you're already gone. Your own cot awaits, narrow, lumpy, and still cold, but your head is full of whispers. You don't write anything down, but you remember everything. Blood on the sheets. Again, you've grown used to it, though it never stops bothering you, not because it's messy, though it is, but because it always means more than just blood. This time, it's faint, a blotch at the center of the linen, dried to a rusty rose. You roll it inward as you strip the bed, careful not to let it show. One of the other maids helps you lift the mattress while you sprinkle vinegar and ash across the frame. You do it silently. No one needs to say what happened. Because when a queen bleeds unexpectedly, 1,000 questions follow, none of them safe. The queen is still in the bathing room, surrounded by steam and worry. Her brow is furrowed. Her fingers curl too tightly around the arm of her chair. The physician is speaking in low Latin. You catch a few words. Imperfectio, menses, abortus. You look away before she sees your face. Later, she'll pretend it was nothing. A flux of the humors, the strain of a fast, the shifting moon. But you always know. Historians still argue whether queens truly understood their fertility, or whether they were at the mercy of superstition and silence. Some courts had learned physicians, others relied on charms, midwives, or even priests. A 16th century manuscript from Florence details a royal remedy involving cinnamon, pigeon broth, and prayers recited backward. You've seen worse, but none of it helps when the king is in a temper. You hear the shouting before he even enters the room. Boots on marble, doors flung open, words laced with threat and bitterness. He doesn't strike her, at least not today, but his words sting hard enough. And you stand nearby, pretending to polish silver. Your ears burn with every syllable. You count the seconds between his breaths. You resist the urge to flinch. You are not invisible in these moments. You are just ignorable, which is much more dangerous. A fringe fact: in some royal courts, maids were trained to sit with the queen during miscarriages, not to comfort her, but to document the event for male advisors. They had to count the clots, describe the color, even record the temperature of the blood, all to determine viability. You don't write anything down, but it doesn't make it less cruel. When the king leaves, the queen doesn't cry. Not this time. She stares at the wall. Her lips move silently. A prayer? A curse? A name? You fold her shawl, bring her tea. She doesn't drink it. You sit near the hearth, stitching quietly, just in case she speaks. Hours pass. She finally says, "Tell no one." You nod. But of course, others already know. Blood has a smell, and courtiers are worse than hounds. That evening, everything is routine again. Supper is served. The queen wears pearls. She smiles at the visiting duke and praises the roast. No one mentions her pallor. No one questions the faint tremble in her hand. You stand behind her chair, motionless. Later, back in her chambers, she removes her jewelry slowly, each clasp a hesitation. She holds a pendant longer than usual. It belonged to her mother, you think, a woman who also miscarried 3 times before producing an heir. You help her into her nightgown. Her skin is cold, though the fire roars. She lets you hold her hand for just a second. Her fingers are bony, dry, delicate as pressed flowers. "Would you ever want children?" she asks softly. You freeze. "I don't know. Your Grace." "Don't," she says. They make you vulnerable. You finish tucking the blankets around her. She turns away, conversation over, and you understand. Not just what she said, but what she meant. Because here, in these rooms full of silk and silence, the body is a battlefield. A queen's womb is not her own. It belongs to the dynasty, the advisors, the astrologers, the kingdom. Even the maid who washes the sheets knows it isn't private. And when that body fails, someone must be blamed. You remember another maid, Lucette. She worked in the nursery wing. Sweet voice, quick hands. When the crown prince died at just 6 weeks, she was accused of wrapping him too tightly. No one proved it. But she was gone. The next day, at court, blood always demands a price. Doesn't matter whose it is. The next morning, the queen is dressed in gold. She walks the garden promenade as if her feet don't ache. You walk a few paces behind. Her train drags a little. You adjust it. She greets nobles with polite joy. She laughs at a joke that isn't funny. Her mask is flawless, but you know better. You saw the blood. You walk in silence, her shadow in every sense of the word, and you wonder, when your time comes, when your body falters, will anyone fold your sheets with the same care? Probably not, because when a maid bleeds unexpectedly, no one prays for her. You are not a spy, at least, not officially, but you've learned that survival at court means noticing things. Who sits where at supper? Who stops talking when you enter? Who suddenly has a new necklace? Or who started praying more often? You see it all. You hear even more. You don't mean to, but palace walls are thin, and your footsteps are quieter than most. And information? It's as valuable as gold, sometimes more. You once whispered a single sentence, just one line, into the ear of the Queen's steward's assistant's cousin. 3 days later, you had a new set of linen underdresses and a half day off. Coincidence? Maybe. But you've learned to recognize the shape of reward and the shape of danger. Because the moment you do know something truly valuable, something sharpens in the air around you. People start noticing you, not for your stitching, not for your posture, but for what you might say. That's when you go still and quiet. You braid your hair tighter. You smile less. You remember Brigitte's mistake. Historians still argue whether court maids were genuine intelligence agents or simply pawns manipulated by higher powers. In the court of Louis XIV, one maid was believed to have orchestrated an entire plot against a minister by passing a single letter in a bookbinding. Another rumor claims a maid at the Habsburg court once blackmailed a duchess using only a hairpin and a misplaced journal entry. No proof, of course, but people believe what they want to believe. You learn quickly who to trust, no one, who to avoid, the harpist who listens too closely, and who might be persuaded to forget your presence in a room entirely. Most men, if you carry a tray and look vaguely apologetic. There are games within games. The Duchess of Arlemont never speaks in full sentences. Everything is implication. The Marquis of Greyfield flirts with everyone, men, women, furniture, but always pauses when he passes the Queen's door. The bishop's aide keeps dropping things near the musician's platform. It's too regular to be clumsy. And you? You're the one refilling cups, collecting gloves, arranging flowers, listening. You never repeat what you hear, at least, not directly. But there are ways. A phrase murmured while passing the scullery girl, a gesture too precise, a comment about the price of saffron that somehow reaches the wrong ears. You're not proud of it, but it keeps you safe, keeps you relevant, because irrelevance is a death sentence here. You remember a girl named Meren. She was diligent, kind, never spoke out of turn, never drew attention. She was gone within a month. No scandal, no accusations, just gone. Her bed filled by someone new by morning. A fringe tidbit. In some Eastern European courts, maids were assigned observation duties during diplomatic visits, required to report back on what foreign guests requested, ate, complimented. Their notes were later coded and burned. You've never been asked to write a report, but you've watched visiting envoys with the same careful eye. Sometimes you're used against your will. A folded letter appears on your pillow. No seal, just a name. Lady Reveline. You know better than to ask questions. The next morning, it vanishes from your apron pocket before you even reach the second stair. Sometimes you're rewarded. A pair of wool stockings, a jar of fig jam, a seat closer to the hearth. Other times, not so much. You once handed off the wrong handkerchief. A mix-up, genuinely. The embroidery matched too closely. That afternoon, 2 gentlemen nearly came to blows in the Rose Court. You kept your head down for a week. The Queen said nothing, but she looked at you for 3 seconds longer than usual. That was enough. There's a kind of power in being underestimated. You're just a maid, after all. You're not expected to understand Latin, but you do. Enough. You're not expected to know the names of distant cousins, but you memorize them. You listen. You store everything like a squirrel hoards nuts, because one day you might need to trade, not just for comfort, but for your life. And when that day comes, you hope you'll know exactly who to whisper to and who not to. One evening, the Queen surprises you. She says, "Do you trust me?" It's a trap, or a test, or both. So you say, "I serve your grace." She tilts her head, smiles slightly. That's not what I asked. You bow, say nothing more, and turn to arrange her hairpins. Later that night, you find a note in your laundry pile. No name, no seal. Just 3 words. Tell her nothing. You burn it without reading further. Because sometimes knowing less is the only way to stay alive. You tighten the corset until your knuckles ache. Then a little more. The lady winces, stumbles, grips the bedpost. Too tight, she gasps. But you know it isn't. Not yet. She's due at court in less than an hour, and the fashion today is ribless. Or at least it seems that way from the silhouettes gliding down the throne room. You've seen girls nearly faint mid-curtsy, their breath caught somewhere between their lungs and their pride. One collapsed near the fountain 2 days ago. Everyone pretended not to notice. You release the laces 1/2 inch. Just enough. There, you murmur. Perfect. She nods. Swallows. She won't eat anything all day. You've learned that court fashion isn't just about looking lovely. It's about control, submission, sometimes even warfare. Every bodice is a battlefield. Every lace is a leash. The queen knows this too. You've seen her wear a gown so tight she couldn't sit, just so the ambassador's wife wouldn't outshine her. You helped her into that gown, layer by miserable layer. She didn't complain. She just held onto your shoulder while you tucked the final panel in place. Beauty is pain, she whispered, and you nodded because you were too polite to say that pain often outlasts beauty. Historians still argue whether these extreme fashions were expressions of female power or simply imposed expectations. Some scholars claim corsetry and tight lacing offered women structure, status, even strategy. Others say it was another form of submission, with women literally bound into obedience. A single preserved corset in the V&A Museum reveals whalebone channels so stiff they cracked under pressure, just like the women who wore them. You've seen the aftermath. Bruised ribs, raw skin. One maid coughed blood for 3 days and insisted it was the wine. Still, every morning, they dress again, and so do you. Not quite so extravagantly, of course. Your own bodice is plain. But even maids must keep to fashion, modestly, practically, invisibly. Your apron is always fresh, your sleeves not too wide, your hair braided just so, because a maid out of fashion is a maid out of place, and a maid out of place doesn't last long. A fringe tidbit? In certain German courts, noblewomen bound their calves with scented cloths to prevent sweat from betraying weakness. You've tried it once, on a dare. All it did was itch. But corsets aren't the only weapon. Fans are worse. They flutter through the air like feathers. Harmless, delicate, almost flirtatious. But every flick, every fold, every pause has meaning. One flick to the left, he's watching you. A slow wave. She knows what you did. A snap-shut fan. Leave. Now. You were taught the language by accident. One night, you were brushing the queen's hair and she was practicing, gesturing to the mirror and muttering under her breath. You memorized each code without meaning to. Now you read fans like books. Open to chapter 5. Scandal. Close with flair. Refusal. The queen is a master of this silent speech. She once conducted an entire argument with the Duchess of Orléans purely through fan gestures. You watched from the corner, pretending to polish candlesticks, your heart pounding. No one else caught it, or if they did, they were smart enough not to let it show. That's another truth of court life. Knowing is dangerous, but showing that you know, that's lethal. The fan games grow especially fierce at banquets. That's when everyone's dressed to dazzle and starve. Plates go mostly untouched. Goblets are sipped for show. You circulate the room, refilling wine, adjusting trains, dabbing perspiration from upper lips with lavender-scented cloths. You once caught the queen's eye across the room, and she gave the faintest flick of her fan. Your cue. You approached discreetly, whispered, "The musicians are ready, Your Grace." And she nodded, relieved. That flick saved her from another minute of dull conversation with a baron who reeked of oysters and hubris. The queen doesn't thank you, of course, but later. She lets you choose which shawl she wears on the terrace. That's her way. You prefer those moments, when it's just the two of you, no corsets, no fan games, just a shared breath under the stars. But they don't last, because soon the doors open, the guests flood in, and the performance begins again. You're back to tightening ribbons, pinning brooches, dusting shoes with crushed pearl powder. Your hands move automatically, but your mind races. Who arrived late? Who wore the wrong color? Who refused the fish course? You store it all, quietly, carefully, because at court, information wears silk, and you wear cotton, but your mind is lined with secrets. As the evening ends, you help the queen disrobe. Each layer peels away like armor. Turkey. Her skin bears the marks. Reddened laces, faint welts. You rub salve into the worst spots, your touch practiced and gentle. "Tomorrow," she says softly, "we wear the blue." You nod. You already laid it out hours ago, because in this world, to serve well is to anticipate, to disappear behind satin and lace, to tie the knots that bind queens in place, and pretend not to feel them tighten around your own wrists. 2. You aren't supposed to hear it, but the scream echoes from behind the curtained alcove like thunder in a wine glass. A second later, the midwife shouts for more water. You move fast. Your feet barely make a sound on the stone tiles. Down the corridor, past the tapestries, up the narrow servant stairs. Boil the water, wrap the towels. No questions asked. You return with arms full, heart pounding, and a practiced blankness on your face. You've done this before. It isn't always a royal birth. Sometimes it's a lady's niece, quietly tucked away for the summer. Sometimes it's the queen herself, though everyone pretends it's just a fever. Sometimes it's no one you're meant to know. Just a young girl who used to help in the kitchens and now suddenly no longer exists. But the pain is always the same, and so is the silence. This one is worse than usual. You hear her cry out again. You hear the midwife's voice, sharp and commanding. You hear someone weep, softly, like a prayer unraveling. You keep your eyes down as you pass the guards. They won't stop you, not with towels in hand. Blood doesn't frighten you, not anymore. When it's over, the air is thick. You step inside to clear the linens. The bed looks like a battlefield. The girl looks like she's aged 20 years in the space of an hour. You are not supposed to speak, but your eyes catch hers. She is not a queen, not even a lady. You think, though you can't be sure, that she was one of the visiting chambermaids from the Western Wing. And now, she's a problem. Historians still argue whether hidden births at court were common, or the stuff of salacious rumor. Letters from Spanish convents suggest royal servants were frequently retired to religious houses after sudden absences. In England, the rules of confinement for noblewomen were rigidly documented, but servant girls often vanish from the record. One 15th century French poem refers obliquely to the red stairs where babes are born and buried. Fringe tidbit, in some courts, Special birthing beds were designed to collapse and burn after unacknowledged pregnancies, just in case the child wasn't meant to exist. You don't know what happens to the baby. You never do. Sometimes a bundle is taken from the room, quiet and still, sometimes not. No one speaks of it afterward. You carry the bloody linens out the back staircase. You toss them into the fire yourself. You watch until the last bit of embroidery, pink flowers, delicate stitchwork crumbles to ash. That night, the queen hosts a small supper. You dress her in silver. She comments on the weather, the bishop's new slippers, and a poem she found boring. She doesn't ask where the chambermaid went. She knows. You do too. Because you cleaned up the blood. The worst part isn't the pain, or the mess, or the lies. It's the normalcy that follows. The quiet restoration of routine. Tomorrow, there will be dancing. And the next day, a wedding. And the next, a christening for a legitimate child. And through it all, you'll be there, tying ribbons, buttoning sleeves, nodding at jokes. You learn to compartmentalize, to stack memory like laundry, neatly folded, hidden in drawers. But sometimes they tumble out. You remember a girl named Jahani, soft voice, fast with embroidery. She made a cradle, once, out of old rushes, and said she'd keep it just in case. She disappeared 3 weeks later. Someone else sleeps in her bed now. Another queen you served lost 3 children in 2 years. She stopped speaking for months, just stared at the fireplace. You brushed her hair in silence, watching strands fall away with each stroke. She never asked about the children, but once, while you fastened her necklace, she said, "I dreamed I was holding something, but I woke with empty arms." You nodded, not in pity, in recognition, because even if it's not your child, the grief lingers. Every cry in the night, every linen you fold, every faint stain that doesn't wash out, you carry them all. No one talks about the cost of silence, but it adds up, in dreams, in twitches, in how you flinch when someone mentions lavender. It was always the scent they used in the birthing room. You never say any of this aloud, but sometimes, when you walk past the queen's chambers at dawn and hear nothing, no movement, no breath, you pause, you hold your hand to the door, you listen, just in case. You don't carry a sword, you carry a tray, but you've seen more battles than the captain of the guard. Not battles of steel and armor, but of glances, gestures, and flutters of lace. The wars here are fought with fans, forks, and favors. And when someone loses, it's rarely with blood, it's with banishment, silence. A seat moved farther from the fire. Today, the Duchess is smiling too much. That's your first clue. She never smiles that wide unless something is about to go terribly wrong for someone else. You're attending a small garden gathering. The queen in pale blue, the ladies in pastel silks, seated on carved benches. Tea is served in cups so fine you're terrified to touch them. Musicians pluck lutes in the corner. Everything looks gentle, harmless, but you can feel the tension like a tuning string pulled tight. Lady Emmeline accepts a lemon tart. She's always nervous around the queen, though she tries not to show it. Her gloves tremble slightly. You notice. The Duchess leans in to speak, just a whisper, but loud enough that others can accidentally overhear. She always did like sour things. The queen doesn't respond, but her eyes narrow a fraction, a slight pause before lifting her teacup. And just like that, a war has begun. Historians still debate how much influence court women wielded through these subtle games. Some argue it was trivial, a performance with no true stakes. Others insist entire political tides turned on a nod at the wrong moment, or a compliment too keenly phrased. One 17th century Venetian ambassador wrote, "They fight without blood, but not without casualties." You've seen it too often to think it harmless. A misplaced flower, a backhanded compliment, a forgotten invitation. All weapons, all calculated. The fans are the worst. In court, they speak a secret language, but the fans aren't just gestures. They're props, tools, shields, swords. Lady Cecily once snapped hers closed after a particular remark from the Queen's cousin. The room went silent. 2 days later, Cecily's father's petition was denied. No one mentioned the fan again. Fringe tidbit, in 16th century Spain, fan etiquette was so complex, it was taught formally to noble girls. A flick meant disdain. A drop meant desire. Tapping the left cheek meant, "I know what you did. You've memorized every move. Today's tea ends without open conflict." But something has shifted. Lady Emmeline leaves early. Too early. Her cheeks flushed. Eyes down. The Queen doesn't stop her. Later that night, the Duchess receives a rare gift, a jeweled comb from the royal treasury. A token of appreciation, the note says. You help unpack it. You polish the gold. You place it carefully on her dresser, aware that it sparkles a little too brightly for a simple thank you. Victories come quietly at court. So do defeats. 1 week later, Lady Emmeline is reassigned to the royal stables. To oversee household linen for the grooms, it's a laughable excuse. You don't see her again. You learn to read the warning signs. A lady starts arriving late. Her hair is no longer freshly curled. She skips chapel once. She speaks too freely. Then suddenly, she's no longer there. You never ask why, because questions are dangerous. They make you noticeable, and the best defense at court is to not be noticed. Still, sometimes you slip. Once, while serving sweetmeats at a masquerade, you accidentally stepped on the hem of Lady Marielle's gown. It tore, not badly, but enough. Her eyes flashed like steel. She said nothing that night, but the next morning, your laundry duties doubled. You never touched her again. The Queen watches all of this. Of course, she rarely participates directly, but her silence is selective. Her smiles are weapons too. When someone is in favor, they are called upon often. Their laughter is always just a little too loud. They sit closer at banquets. They receive subtle gifts, ribbons, honey, imported oranges. When they are not, the cold begins. You feel it before you see it. Eyes avert. Letters go undelivered. Doors close. You've seen a lady of the bedchamber go from favor to forgotten in 3 days flat. One misstep. One joke that didn't land. One rumor whispered a little too near the king's hunting steward. And then, gone. Sometimes you wonder what the Queen feels about all this. Whether she plays along or merely endures it. Whether she orchestrates it or just survives it. Once, you caught her staring into the mirror, not at her reflection, past it. She whispered, "They think I don't see." You didn't answer. You just smoothed her veil and adjusted her brooch. Because you see, too. You see everything. Every fan. Every folded napkin. Every glance. Every insult wrapped in honey. You carry it all in silence. Because at court, knowing how people fall is the best way to avoid falling yourself. But one day you might trip, and you pray. When that happens, no one notices. The wardrobe is a battlefield. Not for you. Of course, you're the one carrying the armor. But for the queen, each morning begins with cloth and ends in war. Today, she's weeping, not sobbing, not hysterical, just the quiet, frustrated tears of a woman who has tried on 5 gowns and liked none of them. The green makes her look tired. The ivory was already worn last week. The gold creases oddly. And the sapphire silk, the one everyone said would impress the envoy, has a tiny stain near the hem. You pointed it out. You shouldn't have. Now you're repinning bodices and brushing fur trim while she mutters insults not meant for you, but hurled in your direction anyway. What do I even pay them for? She snaps. Though of course it isn't she who pays anyone. You murmur an apology. Your fingers don't stop moving. You hate this part of the day. Historians still argue whether queens truly obsessed over clothing, or if male chroniclers exaggerated their vanity. Some records show detailed inventories of gowns with marginal notes like not flattering in candlelight. Others depict queens as almost fashion monastic, leaving decisions to their ladies or confessors. But surviving portraits tell another story. Painted layers of color, texture, and embroidery that speak of image, identity, and enormous pressure. You know better than any historian. The queen's power is stitched into every seam. The gown she wears today could determine whether the visiting duke sees her as an aging matron or a formidable monarch. The wrong shade, the wrong trim, and she'll be whispered about for weeks. And she knows it. The wardrobe mistress is late. You fetch the keys yourself. They hang on a loop at the back of the linen cupboard, beside sachets of dried thyme and orange peel. The smell follows you down the corridor. The key turns with a soft click. Inside, velvet, brocade, silk, fur, lace, linen, dresses so heavy they need scaffolding. Gowns that take 4 women to lift, boxes of gloves, fans, slippers, rows of corsets, some barely wider than your forearm, jewelry wrapped in muslin, belts of gold, pearls, twisted ribbon, capes lined in fox and stoat. Each piece has a name, not a label, but a reputation. The one she wore to Eleanor's wedding. The one that made the dowager weep. The one she had altered after the miscarriage. You know them all, and you know which one to choose today. It takes 3 of you to lift the skirt onto the queen, 2 more to lace the bodice. She stands with her arms slightly raised, as still as a statue, letting you fasten, pin, adjust. You can feel her trembling beneath the fabric. She'll be here, won't she? The queen says quietly. You know who she means. Her sister, the one who always looks radiant, the one whose hips haven't yet betrayed her, the one who the court now whispers might have a better claim. She's expected, you say. The queen exhales. Then make me unforgettable. You do your best. A fringe tidbit? In the Polish-Lithuanian court, royal gowns were sometimes scented with herbs stitched into the lining, a walking perfume. You tried that once, with rosemary, and got scolded for meddling. But this gown has lavender under the sleeves. Your own addition. She hasn't noticed. When she steps into the hallway, heads turn. You see it. The way even the footmen straighten. The way the ladies pause. The way her sister blinks. Just once. Before smiling too broadly. The gown worked. You allow yourself a breath of satisfaction. But there's more. There's always more. The train needs to be held. The earrings need adjusting. A seam on the glove is misaligned. It's tiny, but the Countess will notice. You pull a needle from your sleeve and fix it mid-step. You are invisible and essential. The court revolves around the Queen, and the Queen is held together by stitches and pins. And you, the evening passes in a blur. Dances, toasts, performances. The Queen speaks with poise. She laughs when needed. She never falters. But behind it all, you know she's thinking about the stain, the one you pointed out, the flaw she couldn't unsee. Later, in her chambers, she lets the mask fall. You help her out of the gown, gently, reverently. She sinks into the chair near the fire. Was I enough? She whispers. You want to say yes. You want to say you were magnificent. Instead, you say, you were unforgettable. Because that's what she asked for. And tonight, it's true. She smiles. Just barely. You place the gown back in its muslin shroud. You smooth the folds. You whisper to it. Just once. Well done. Because in this world, even fabric can be brave. The palace is quieter at night, but never silent. You know every creak of every stair, every groan of every window shutter, the moan of the wind through the west corridor, the soft scrape of a mouse paw beneath the pantry door, the clink of someone's goblet, forgotten on a sill. This is the night watch shift. Most girls dread it. You've come to love it, not because it's restful. It isn't, but because it's yours. For once, no commands, no gowns to carry, no fans to decode. Just candlelight, cool stone, and the occasional echo of your own breath. You carry your lantern like a priestess, moving from chamber to corridor, checking that fires are low but not dead, that windows are latched, that no one has collapsed in the hallway from too much wine or grief. You've seen both. Some nights, you find nothing. Other nights, you find things. A misplaced ring, a door left ajar, a bed that looks slept in, though its occupant was supposed to be elsewhere, a letter, half burned, a handkerchief bearing a crest not belonging to this wing of the castle. You don't ask questions. You just tidy, quietly. Historians still debate the actual duties of royal maids on night rotation. Some claim they merely refilled coals and guarded linens. Others suggest they served as informal security, witnesses, and sometimes even scapegoats. One document from the court of Saxony records a maid punished not for stealing, but for witnessing something she shouldn't have. You move with care. Tonight, the Queen is restless. You hear her pacing before you reach the door. Her footsteps are uneven. She speaks aloud, to herself, or to someone only she can see. When you enter, she startles slightly, then softens. I couldn't sleep, she says. You nod. You knew that. She gestures vaguely. Read to me. You always carry a book for just such a request. Tonight it's a volume of poetry, worn and foxed, the leather soft at the edges. You read in a low voice. She listens with her eyes closed, but partway through the stanza, she interrupts. Do you believe in ghosts? You pause. Yes, you say, because anything else feels disrespectful. She nods slowly. I think they visit me sometimes, not the angry kind, the lonely kind, the ones who never got to finish their sentences. You place a marker in the book. You do not speak. There was a girl here once, she continues. Before your time, she braided my hair every morning, always hummed a tune from her village. I never asked where it was. She fell ill, quickly. They moved her to a side chamber and never brought her back. You've heard the story, but hearing it from the Queen is different. She visits the queen says. When I'm at my most tired, I think she still wants to finish her song. You nod again. You know what she means. Sometimes, when the wind moves strangely, you swear you hear singing. There are always stories about ghosts in the palace. One fringe tidbit: in 15th century Bohemia, maids used to place iron scissors under their pillows to ward off spirits, not to harm them, but to cut the ties between the living and the dead. You tried it once. It gave you a crick in the neck. Tonight, the queen falls asleep in her chair. You place a shawl over her shoulders. You return the book to your apron. You leave the door slightly ajar, just in case. You make your rounds again. On your way past the chapel, you pause. A single candle still burns near the altar. You extinguish it gently. Back in the lower halls, another maid is halfway through her own rounds. You exchange nods. She's young, still jumpy. You remember when you were like that? Jumping at shadows, startled by the rustle of drapery? Now, it's the silence that unnerves you. You return to your chamber near dawn. Your shift is over, but sleep won't come. Your eyes ache. Your back protests, but your mind is wide awake. You lie on your cot, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere above you, the queen is dreaming. Somewhere below, a guard is dozing on his spear. And somewhere just beyond, perhaps, a girl who once braided hair hums her unfinished song. You close your eyes and listen. You carry a ring of keys. Not many people notice. They're small, quiet things, iron, brass, a few old ones smooth from generations of fingers. They hang from a ribbon inside your apron pocket, tied twice so they don't jingle. These keys don't open grand treasure rooms or heavy oak doors. They open drawers, cabinets, boxes hidden behind panels, places that aren't marked on any map but are, somehow, more important than the armory, and more dangerous. Tonight, Wantois, you need the third key from the left. It's thin, curved like a bird's claw. It opens the writing desk in the queen's study. She's asked for her journal. You walk quickly, but not nervously. Too fast, and you draw attention. Too slow, and the steward might intercept you. You reach the study, shut the door behind you, and unlock the drawer. The journal is bound in leather, warm to the touch. You hesitate. You never read. Not really. But the top page is slightly open. One word catches your eye. Loyalty. You close it gently. Lock the drawer again. You do not linger. Historians still argue how much power court maids had over personal royal items. Some treat them as mere messengers. Others suggest they acted as guardians of intimate truths. A Flemish court record notes that a queen's entire correspondence was once stored by her maid, not the chancellor. Another speaks of a scandal in which a maid sold a diary page to a rival duchess, resulting in 3 quiet resignations and a mysterious case of winter fever. You keep your secrets closer than that, and you guard your keys like they're bones from your own spine. You've seen what happens when the wrong drawer is opened. Once, a maid unlocked a cabinet she wasn't meant to, just following instructions. She said, inside, letters, dozens of them, all signed by a name no longer spoken aloud. The next day, she was gone. The drawer was nailed shut. Fringe tidbit: in several courts, it was tradition for a queen's most trusted maid to carry a single key on a chain around her neck, symbolizing not only access, but silence. Some maids were even buried with them, never having spoken what they'd seen. You don't wear yours that way. Too obvious. But you've considered it. Because these keys, They don't just open wood and iron, they open lives. There's the key to the spice chest: clove, cinnamon, dried violets, kept under lock because last spring someone tried to poison a wine bottle with bitter almond oil. There's the key to the reliquary cabinet, where a fragment of some long-dead saint's bone rests in a glass tube wrapped in silk. No one's sure if it's real, but no one dares open it without permission. And there's the little one, the rusted one. No one asks what it's for. You hope no one ever finds out. Tonight, after delivering the journal, you're told to retrieve a specific box from the Queen's private dressing chamber. You know which one? Marquetry inlaid, a tulip motif on the top. You've dusted it often. You unlock the cabinet, remove the box, and pause. It's heavier than usual. You do not open it, but you feel the weight of secrets settle into your arms. Back in her chamber, the Queen accepts it with no expression. She doesn't thank you. She never does. But she doesn't dismiss you either. Do you believe in fate? She asks, eyes fixed on the fire. I believe in locks, you say quietly. She nods. Locks. Then? And whether the key fits. Later, you replay the conversation in your head. It's not the words, it's the tone. She's thinking of something, planning. You can feel it. You start sleeping with your hand over your apron pocket, just in case. Because keys can protect, but they can also betray. You once found a key left on a side table, carelessly, foolishly. You wrapped it in cloth and returned it to the steward. He stared at you too long before nodding. After that, you started keeping track. You drew a small diagram under your mattress, not detailed, not labeled, just shapes, reminders. You erased it last week. Paranoia, perhaps. But at court, paranoia is just self-preservation with polish. One day, the Queen asks if you still have the key to the prayer cabinet, the one with the jeweled crucifix and the sealed scroll. You lie. You say it's with the steward. She smiles faintly. Good. That night, you move the key to a new hiding place. You don't know if she trusts you, but you know she's watching. And so are others. One morning, the keys are tangled, tighter than you left them. You didn't do it. You know you didn't. Someone else tried. You don't panic. You don't report it. You simply change the order, swap 2 ribbons, add a decoy, let them try again. Because if someone thinks you're careless, they'll show their hand, and when they do, you'll be ready. You don't own ink, but you've burned enough of it. In the quiet of early dawn, before the Queen wakes, you kneel by the hearth with a bundle of paper, not yours, of course, hers, or someone's. It doesn't matter now. One by one, you feed the pages into the flame. The handwriting curls into smoke. You don't read the contents, not really, but certain phrases are impossible to ignore. You must forget me. Our time together was brief, but enough. This cannot continue. You've destroyed dozens like this. Some were letters, never sent. Some were journals. Some were poetry, the sort that's too tender to survive sunlight. A few were written by queens. A few by those who once hoped to be. And occasionally, rarely, they're in your own hand. You don't keep a diary. That would be reckless. But sometimes, on scraps of linen, on the backs of failed embroidery patterns, you write down thoughts that won't stay quiet, just to see them outside your head. Then you burn them. Historians still argue whether court maids were literate, and if so, how much. Records from Sweden suggest many were trained to read recipes, prayers, and royal proclamations. Letters from Castile indicate that some maids acted as secretaries in all but title. One famously fluent maid in the court of Margaret of Anjou was rumored to compose the queen's personal verses, though of course she received no credit. Fringe fact: in medieval Brittany, certain noblewomen trained their maids to write in mirror, a backward script used to disguise private notes. You tried it once, it gave you a headache. Now, you stick to short phrases, codes, symbols, a stitched rose with one thorn missing. Watch the lady in green, a bird embroidered with red thread. Someone has flown. You've hidden messages in hems. You've unpicked entire declarations from the cuffs of dresses. But tonight, it's the diary that matters. The queen handed it to you wordlessly after supper. It wasn't her usual journal. This one was older, worn at the corners, no crest. The ink faded in places. She didn't say burn this, but she didn't need to. You knew, so you waited until the house was asleep, until the candles guttered low, until even the mice had stopped rustling in the pantry. And now, you feed the last page to the flames. It crumples slowly, resisting the heat for a moment, as if reluctant to vanish. Then it's gone. You stir the ashes with the poker, just to be sure. Then you scrub your hands with lemon peel to remove the scent. The next day, everything proceeds as usual. The queen asks for her shawl. You hand it to her. Her eyes meet yours. She says nothing, but you both know it no longer exists. Sometimes you wonder what would happen if you kept just one page. Something small. A love note. A poem. Proof that someone felt something real within these walls. But you never do. Because the penalty for discovery isn't dismissal. It's worse. They'd say you stole it, that you forged it, that you misunderstood. They'd say you imagined it all, and you'd lose not only your place, but your truth. So you burn. You burn confessions. You burn longing. You burn names. Once, you saw a lady throw her own diary into the sea. She watched it bob for a moment before it sank. Then she whispered, "Now no one can misremember me." But paper always leaves a trace. You've seen someone punished for a page they didn't write, and someone praised for one they did. So, you've learned to memorize, just in case. You remember the phrasing of the Queen's best letter. It was never about power, but the absence of it. You remember the poem you found stitched into a sleeve. She waits where shadows bloom, her name unspoken, her heart intact. You remember the unsigned note tucked into a prayer book. He will not come. Be brave. And you carry them, all of them, because someone has to. Not every fire destroys. Some preserve. You dream, sometimes, of a hidden library, a place where all the lost words of the court are stored, the love letters, the regrets, the truth spoken only in moonlight. You imagine them shelved, sorted by emotion, cross-referenced by year, a library of silence. You'll never see it, but you build it in your mind, one burned page at a time. The Queen has fallen, not tripped, not slipped, fallen, from favor, from grace, from the pedestal the court so carefully balanced her upon. It happens slowly, then all at once, a missed invitation, a canceled audience, a seat further from the center, an echo of a whisper that no one will admit to starting, and then exile, not official, of course. That would be too merciful. No, this is softer, sharper. She is still queen, technically, but her chambers have grown quieter. The air inside them feels like morning. And you stay, but barely, because when a queen falls, her maids fall with her. Historians still argue whether the downfall of queens meant automatic ruin for their households. Some point to examples where loyal maids followed exiled queens into convents or distant villas. Others cite records of servants reassigned, replaced, or accused of corrupt influence. A 14th century Danish ledger notes a complete turnover of maids after a queen's annulment, names crossed out in ink so dark it bled through the page. You start packing her things, not openly, there's no announcement, no destination, but the tapestries come down, the gowns are folded, the jewelry boxes closed and tied with cords. You carry out one bundle at a time, wrapped in muslin, labeled in code. You work in silence. She says very little. Once, she reaches out to touch your hand, just for a moment. Then she lets go. No one says the word disgraced, but you hear it in the hallways. No one says replaced, but there's already a new girl brushing the princess's hair. A fringe tidbit? In early French courts, queens in disgrace were often relocated to country manors with a single loyal maid, known as the shadow sister. You wonder who coined that term. You wonder if it was meant kindly. Today, you are a shadow. You follow her to prayers. You braid her hair. You fetch her tea that she no longer drinks. The fire burns lower. The room grows colder. And you stay. You remember her before. Her sharpness. Her laughter. The way she tilted her head just before delivering a perfectly devastating line. That version of her flickers sometimes, but mostly, she is quiet now. One evening, she asks you, "Do they still speak of me?" You hesitate. "Less?" She nods. "Good. Let them forget." You want to say they won't. You want to say, "You remember," but she doesn't want comfort. Not anymore. So you return to folding. You notice something strange. She starts sending for fewer items. No perfume, no combs, no books. She dismisses the wardrobe mistress, then tweet away that you remain, and then one morning, she says, "You should leave." You freeze. "Your Grace? This place will bury you," she murmurs. "I'd rather you left it walking." But you shake your head, because this place may bury you, but not before you help carry her out. So, when the day finally comes, discreet, gray-skied, unremarkable, you are ready. She wears traveling clothes, no jewels, a hood that hides her face, a single ring left behind on the dresser. You pack it last, wrapped in silk. No procession, no farewells. Just a carriage waiting with its wheels already mud-streaked. You help her in. You do not cry. Not until you return to her chambers and see the empty chair by the fire. The one where she used to sit with her thoughts. Her dreams. Her disappointments wrapped in lace. You sit there, just once, then rise. They tell you your post is over, that you're to be reassigned. The new queen will need a full household. There's a list being made, but no one speaks to you directly. They know you belong to her. You don't argue. You pack your own things in silence. A comb, a ribbon, a book of psalms with the corner torn. You pass the mirror and pause. You look older, sharper. You walk straighter, but your shoulders ache. You were her maid, and you fell with her, but somehow you're still standing. You wonder if she is, too. There are drums outside, slow, measured, the kind of rhythm that doesn't invite dancing. It marks the passage of something sacred or final. You stand at the edge of the great hall, eyes lowered, hands clasped. Everyone else is already in place. The lords in their finery, the ladies in veils and carefully practiced sorrow. Even the kitchen boys wear borrowed boots today. It's not a wedding, not a coronation. It's an execution. And you, like everyone else, are expected to pretend it's a ceremony. Court life doesn't stop for endings. It just changes its costume. The queen is gone, not dead, not officially, just elsewhere, forgotten by order. A different queen now stands at the center of the court stage, her veil brighter, her smile fresher, her words sharp with performance. She greets the Duchess with a kiss. She praises the choir. She calls you the quiet one, as if it's a compliment. You curtsy and disappear before she can learn your name. But your hands still remember the other one, the queen who left, the curve of her braid, the way her voice dropped when she was thinking, the silence she carried like a second cloak. Now you serve her successor. New gowns, new perfumes, a new rhythm of the day. You adjust quickly, efficiently, because court doesn't pause for grief. Still, it lingers. Today, you're tasked with helping set up the hall for a memorial mass. Not for the queen, no, for the king's cousin, or his dog, or someone who meant something, at least briefly. Ceremony is a skill here, an art, and you're part of the paint. You smooth out altar cloths. You arrange lilies, though they smell like old rain and bruised apples. You light tapers. You polish the candlesticks until your reflection appears in their curves, then vanishes with the next breath. You know these steps. You've done them before, for births, for deaths, for weddings, for feasts. Each one feels the same. Each one is followed by silence. Historians still argue how court maids processed grief. Some say they were trained to repress it, taught that mourning was a luxury for those with status. Others suggest that maids wept quietly, in stairwells, behind laundry, or while pretending to pray. You've done all three. One fringe tidbit. In the Hungarian court, it was said that a court maid could not speak aloud for a full day after attending a royal funeral, or her soul would follow the departed into the afterlife. You follow that once, just in case. Today, no one has died. Not officially, but you feel a death nonetheless. The choir sings. You mouth the words. The new queen walks past, her eyes scanning the rows, measuring, judging. You feel the weight of her gaze, but she doesn't stop. Not today. After the ceremony, you're called to assist with the feast. Yes, there's a feast, because mourning is brief, and wine must be poured. You carry platters. You refill goblets. You pretend not to see the tension when two noblemen nearly bump elbows. You definitely pretend not to hear when the dowager countess mutters, "The old queen never would have worn crimson on a day like this." You agree, silently. You leave early to tidy the royal chapel. Alone. You light one final candle at the back, behind the altar. You don't name it aloud. You just watch it flicker. The flame dances in silence. You remember the coronation, years ago now. You were barely trained. You spilled ink on your shift that morning and had to hide it with a brooch. You watched as the crown was placed, as the queen looked up and didn't smile. You didn't understand then. Now you do. Ceremony is theater, but loss, that's real, and it's yours to carry. Tonight, the queen hosts a celebration. You're not invited. Of course not. But you help prepare the rooms. New flowers, fresh linens, oil the hinges, so the doors open silently. Hide the tired chairs in the storeroom. Replace the goblets with ones that don't wobble. By dusk, the music begins. You listen from the hallway. It's beautiful, but it isn't hers. You return to your chamber late. Your shift is damp from wine. Your feet ache. You hold your apron like a shield. As you drift off to sleep, you think about the queen's last night in the palace, how she sat by the fire, silent, how you brushed her hair with trembling fingers, how she looked in the mirror, not at herself, but through herself. You wonder if anyone else remembers. Probably not. But you do. And that's a ceremony no one will ever see. You are called into the Hall of Accounts, not because you've done anything wrong, not exactly, but because there is a new list being written, and your name, it seems, is part of it. You stand quietly while the steward flips through a ledger thick with creases and old ink. Behind him, the window is open, and the wind turns one corner of the page just slightly, again and again, like it's trying to escape. He doesn't look up when he speaks. You're to be reassigned. There's no please, no reason, just the word, reassigned. To whom? For how long? Is it punishment or reward? You don't ask. You nod. Your heart pounds, but your expression is still. It turns out you're to serve Lady Eleanor. She's not royal, not yet, but she's from the kind of family that collects dowries like war trophies, and there are whispers about a marriage being arranged to a cousin of the king. You're not excited. You've heard about her. She's young, yes, but calculating, pretty, but cold. The kind of woman who doesn't have friends, only rivals and reflections. Still, you obey, because court life isn't just dancing in veils. It's a market, a hierarchy, and sometimes you're the product being traded. Historians still argue whether court maids were truly independent servants or more like temporary extensions of royal will. Some contracts suggest they could be dismissed or reassigned at whim. Others include promises of dowries or future marriages, provided the maid served with dignity and honor. What they don't include is choice. You pack your things, a comb, a clean shift, 2 letters from your sister that still smell faintly of bay leaf and smoke, and your silence. You meet Lady Eleanor in her solar. She doesn't look at you right away. She's seated, her fingers trailing through a bowl of garnets as if she's stirring a potion. She finally glances up and says, "Ah, you're the one who served her. Not the queen, not the former mistress, just her." You nod once. "She liked books, didn't she?" Lady Eleanor asks. "She did." Eleanor shrugs. "I don't keep them hidden." You say, "Yes, my lady." The days with her are colder, not in temperature. Her rooms are always blazing with fire, but in tone. She doesn't speak unless necessary. She gives instructions without eye contact. She doesn't like to be touched, even when you help her dress. And yet, she watches everything, where the queen carried grief like a scent. Lady Eleanor wears ambition, like perfume, light, cloying, and always present. You polish her shoes. They're rarely worn. She prefers people come to her. You mend her gowns. She prefers blues and grays, nothing that draws too much attention. But every hem is perfect. Every cuff exact. She doesn't speak to you until one morning. Unprovoked, she says, "I will not fall like she did." You blink. "My lady? Keep my secrets," she says, "and I'll make sure you have a future." You should be cautious, but you've lived long enough here to know that a future, any future, is currency. You nod. Then let's begin, she says. From that day, you're not just her maid, you're her mirror. She starts asking for your opinion on colors, on placement, on guests. Not often, but enough. She asks you to watch who bows too low, who lingers too long near the banisters, who eats what at the feasts. You realize, slowly, that she is not waiting to marry into power. She's preparing to walk into it alone. And you're her eyes now. It is not love. It is not kindness. But it is trust. And that, at court, is rarer than affection. One fringe tidbit? In the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, court maids were sometimes gifted as part of a dowry, sent with their mistress into her husband's household. But the ones who were trusted stayed behind, paid to stay near the next rising star. You suspect you are one of those. You miss the queen, desperately, but you do not say her name aloud anymore. Not because you fear reprisal, but because no one remembers her the way you do. And in this place, that kind of memory is dangerous. Instead, you watch Lady Eleanor. You sew. You listen. You wait. Because the dowry market isn't just for noble women. Maids are bartered too. Maybe you'll be married off to a clerk, a steward, a soldier who lost 2 fingers and now tends to horses. Maybe, or maybe, just maybe, you'll follow this woman all the way to the throne. You don't allow yourself to hope, but you do allow yourself to stay ready, just in case. The queen is dying, not the new one, the real one, the one who brushed her own hair when she couldn't bear the weight of anyone else's hand, the one whose letters you burned, whose secrets you carried in your apron pocket like folded prayers. You hear it from the laundress first? A whisper. She's taken to bed. The physicians won't say it aloud, but you don't react. You just nod and stir the linen water. By nightfall, the whispers swell. Her condition is delicate, then grave, then, suddenly, final. The old queen, exiled, forgotten, irrelevant, is dying, and you are not there. You're no longer her maid. You belong to Lady Eleanor now, and Lady Eleanor doesn't approve of nostalgia, or sentiment, or speaking the names of the replaced. But when you hear the bell toll 3 times, low, slow, final, you pause, because that sound is not just a death knell, it's a memory call. Historians still argue how former queens were mourned, especially those who'd been pushed aside or quietly removed. Some courts offered token ceremonies, others erased their legacies altogether. A rare letter from a maid in Vienna reads, "We hung no black ribbons." The silence was louder than any hymn. At your court, there are no black ribbons, just a quietly redrawn seating chart, but you remember her, and when no one's looking, you cry. You cry not because she was kind, she wasn't always, not because she was just, she often wasn't. You cry because you knew her before the exile, before the silence, before her voice faded into mere rumor. You're given the task of packing her remaining possessions, not by order, no one will admit to caring, but because you're the only one who still remembers where everything goes. You enter the storage chamber, the one down the narrow stairs with the cracked lantern hook. Her things are still there, wrapped, stacked, tied in ribbons that have faded to dust colors. You open each one slowly. A shawl, a prayer book, a comb with 3 missing teeth, a bottle of rose oil turned sour, a single shoe, the other lost in some long-forgotten move, and the ring. You remember it, Ro. She left it on the dresser before she vanished. You wrapped it in silk. You kept it hidden, not as theft, but as memory. You place it now on the bundle of her things, A quiet crown for a queen who will never be crowned again. Fringe tidbit: in some Mediterranean courts, it was tradition for the maids of a dead queen to each place a lock of her hair in a candle, burning it so her memory would pass into light. You have none of her hair, but you light a candle anyway. You burn no page. You write no poem. You simply stand. Lady Eleanor does not acknowledge the death, not with words, but she wears gray for 2 days. Unusual, considering she favors cool blues and soft silvers. You know it's not grief, it's positioning. After all, the throne has a shadow now, and shadows mean opportunity. You expect to be reassigned again. New queen, new household, new era, but no word comes. Instead, Lady Eleanor calls you to her side and says, "You knew her better than anyone." You say nothing. She continues, "I want to learn from her mistakes." A pause. "I want you to help me avoid them." You understand then, the queen may be gone, but her ghost still walks these halls, in strategy, in silence, and in you. That night, you write her name, just once, on a scrap of paper. No dates, no titles, just the name. You tuck it into your shift. You will burn it later, but not yet. Not yet. The next morning, the court is vibrant again. Flowers, music. Lady Eleanor receives a bracelet from the Duke. Someone announces a festival. The bells ring for joy this time. No one speaks of the queen who died yesterday, except the wind, which stirs the curtains as you pass, like a breath too late. You carry her memory like a locked drawer, and you have the key. The lock clicks behind you. You are no longer welcome in Lady Eleanor's chambers. It isn't scandal. It isn't punishment. It isn't even personal. It's replacement. Younger hands. Faster feet. A girl who curtsies deeper and giggles on command. Who hasn't yet learned to stay silent after someone leaves the room. She'll learn. You gather your things quietly. There aren't many. A worn shift. A comb. A half-finished needlepoint you started 3 winters ago. Never quite finding time to finish the last rose. You don't weep. This is how it happens. One day, you are trusted. You adjust a queen's veil. You pour the wine that settles a nobleman's nerves. You are the hinge on which the court door turns. And then, just like that, you're no longer needed. Historians rarely mention what happened to aging court maids. Some speculate they were married off, usually to widowed guards or older stewards. Others suggest they were sent back to the countryside with a gift of thanks. But many records simply go blank. A name appears for years, and then doesn't. You are not old, but you are remembered, and that is not always a good thing. They offer you a small stipend, enough to live, not to thrive. You're given the choice, a place in the laundry halls, or a return to your family, if they still have room for you. You choose neither. Not yet. Instead, you remain in the palace, floating between tasks like mist between columns. They let you stay. You're quiet. You're useful. You know where the linen goes, how to fold a mantle so it doesn't crease, which herbs best mask the scent of anxiety. But no one looks at you anymore. Not really. You become what the palace makes of its past, a moving shadow, a whisper of someone who once mattered. Your joints ache more than they used to. Your fingers tremble a little when you sew. But your memory? Sharp as ever. You remember the queen's scent? The way she tilted her head before a difficult decision? The way she muttered to herself while brushing her own sleeves, as if preparing for battle? You remember all of them, really. The girls who vanished, the men who never stayed, the babies never named, the gossip sewn into seams, the secrets folded into lavender sachets. And you remember yourself, once, younger, braver, a girl who arrived with 3 belongings and a fierce belief that she could make herself indispensable. A fringe tidbit? In some northern courts, retired maids were given a single bronze coin with the image of the queen they served. It wasn't legal currency. It was just memory. You never received one. You do still have the key, though, the small one, rusted, forgotten. No one asked for it back. Maybe no one remembers it exists. Maybe it never fit anything after all. You keep it anyway. Sometimes you visit the places where you used to work, the old dressing room, the back corridor with the cracked tile, the stairwell where Lady Brienne once slipped and blamed it on you. You stand in the doorway, breathing memories. They never see you, not the new girls, with their bright ribbons and flawless skin, not the ambitious ones, who practice their curtsies when they think no one's watching. You were them once. You wonder what they'll be when they're you. And then one day, you aren't called at all. You sit on the bench near the herb garden, sewing, waiting, forgetting for a moment that no one is expecting you. The sun is warm. The lavender hums with bees. You haven't had a moment this quiet in years. You think of the queen, your queen, and wonder if she ever had a moment like this. Probably not. She was always surrounded by servants, by watchers, by doubt. But maybe, in some small corner of the world, she found peace. Maybe you can too. That night, you light a candle. Not for her, not for them, for yourself, because you survived. You remember. You mattered. And even if no one says your name, even if the palace forgets your steps, the stone remembers, and that is enough. You sweep the last step of the eastern corridor. No one asked you to. It's just something you do now, out of habit, maybe, or defiance, or a need to move your hands when your name hasn't been spoken all day. Outside, the world has changed again. A new queen has arrived. She stepped out of the carriage wearing white and smiling too brightly. The crowd cheered, the bell tower rang, and you watched from behind a curtain, brushing dust from the hem of someone else's memory. The palace hums with newness, new banners, new rules, new girls with fresh aprons and hopeful eyes. You are not new. You are a relic now. But still, they come to you. One maid asks you how to lace a sleeve properly so it doesn't twist when the lady raises her arms. Another asks how to tuck a shawl so it looks like it's falling off by accident. A third, younger still, asks what to do when the queen throws a goblet in anger. You tell them, not kindly, but clearly. Because if you're going to be forgotten, you might as well pass on something worth remembering. Historians don't argue about women like you. They simply don't write about them. There are ledgers of gowns, accounts of ceremonies, names of queens and their husbands and sons and horses, but not the women who held the basin, who tied the ribbon, who remembered where the poison was kept and chose not to mention it. Still, you're there, in the stitch of a collar, in the scent of lavender that lingers longer than it should, in the angle of a fan snapped closed just before someone's heart broke, a fringe tidbit, in a nearly illegible 13th century French household book. There is one line scribbled in the margin beside a list of chamber duties. It reads, "Marie remembered everything." That's you now. Marie, or Joan, or Alex, or no name at all. The woman who remembered everything, even the parts no one else wanted to. You sit on the bench near the kitchens one last time. In your lap, a small bundle, your comb, your thread, the key you never returned, a folded scrap of paper with a name written in faded ink, yours. You rise. No one notices, but you do. You leave the palace slowly, as though stepping through a story. You do not look back, because behind you is dust and ribbon, perfume and power, blood and silence. And ahead, stillness, maybe peace. You walk into it with the quiet dignity of someone who spent a lifetime not being seen and still managed to see everything. Word count 1097. Wind down below end of main script. The palace fades behind you. Its sounds grow smaller. The bells become mere suggestion. The voices are nothing more than echoes on stone. Your steps slow. The road before you is soft with dust. Trees line the horizon. Somewhere, a bird calls once, then falls quiet. The breeze is gentle. For the first time in a long while, it doesn't smell like lavender or parchment or regret. Just grass, earth. Something that feels like time, stretching out rather than closing in. You let your shoulders relax. The heaviness that lived in your spine for years begins to melt, not all at once, but enough. Enough to take a deeper breath. Enough to let your fingers unclench. Your memories follow. Not like ghosts, more like shadows that soften with distance. You remember the queen's voice, the creak of her chair, the way her gaze flicked to you and away, so fast it hurts sometimes. You remember your own hands, steady, capable, calloused, and the quiet pride you never dared to name. None of it was wasted. You mattered. Even if your name never made it into the records, the work of your hands did. The care, the silence, the thread pulled taut through fabric, through time. You sit on a stone by the roadside and close your eyes. The wind plays in your hair. The light turns golden. And for just a moment, everything is still. So, rest now. You've done more than enough. You've kept secrets, held king's tempers, witnessed joy and sorrow and everything in between. You've survived. Sleep, now, if you like. And as the sky darkens, let your breath slow. Let the stories settle. Let the quiet cradle you. You are safe. You are home. You are remembered. End of script. Sweet dreams.